Howdy folks, we here at BioWare know you want more cartel packs, so we're bringing out 10 more cartel packs over the next 12 months, and of course we are very proud to say we have no plans to bring out any operations or strongholds or any of that. What, don't you want more cartel packs? Oh god, oh god, no. Please stop throwing things. Yes, excellent. We have an estimated revenue now of $4.3 billion. Oh yes, BioWare, do come in. Is there something you'd like to discuss? EA, it was terrible. It's almost like the fan base doesn't want to see more cartel packs. How can that be? Blasphemy, they always want cartel packs. We're gonna have to come up with more ideas. Something new, something fresh. Oh god, we're not good at that. Actually, me and my buddy Visceral Games actually had an idea for, like, Space Game of Thrones. How does that sound? Damn it, you fool, don't you understand? Space Game of Thrones was our idea for Knights of the Eternal Throne. Did you try adding lightsabers? Cause if I've learned one thing, these fans really like them lightsabers, and we should add more lightsabers to the game. Don't you see, BioWare, we have to do this without listening to the fans. If we listen to the fans, we lose face, and then the shareholders will get really pissed off, and that's not fun. Our shareholders are more important to us. We need to bring out a new expansion to the cartel market. Cartel Market 2.0. That's an excellent idea, EA, and I'm not just saying that because you'll fire me if I disagree. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? It's LorOnline here again today with another video, and today we are going to be doing the top 10 raid bosses in Star Wars The Old Republic.
Starting with number 10.
Coming in at number 10 today, we have the G4B3 Heavy Fabricator droid, also known as the second to last boss on the Kraga's Palace operation. In summary, this boss is actually one of my favourite, purely because it has one mechanic that really stands out on this list, and that is the fact that two players in the group have to play a minigame called Tower of Hanoi, but instead of doing it on the regular traditional board game, you have to do it with computers, and you have to use the computers to basically allow the DPS to do damage to the boss. And I think that is just such a cool mechanic in a raid. For those of you who don't know what Tower of Hanoi is, basically it's a game that incorporates a pole and discs, and the idea is to get all three discs in height order to be on the exact same pole, starting with the longest at the bottom and the shortest at the top. So moving on from mechanics, the actual reason I love this boss as much as I do, it's primarily because of actually a function in Nightmare mode, where depending on which pillar he was under, he'd get a different buff or effect. So for example, if you were to get everything right in the center pillar, the actual boss would pull all the proximity mines towards him and they'd all detonate and do mass damage and basically one-shot tanks. So tanks had to basically prepare themselves for these various events that would occur. And it kind of just expanded on the original hard mode version of the boss fight, and because of that, it definitely makes number 10 on this list. Just the Nightmare mode is just exceptional for this fight.
Number 9.
Coming in at number 9 today is the final boss in the Operation Scum and Villainy. This boss on story mode and hard mode is very easy, but when it comes to Nightmare, it is a huge leap up. It is incredibly difficult and requires a lot of coordination between yourself, the DPS, the healers, and the tanks. This boss, of course, is Dreadmaster Styrak. Dreadmaster Styraks by themselves is actually not a very difficult boss. Ultimately, it's just a quick ad clear that moves into a tank and spank, then a DPS check, and sort of concludes overall with an enraged form of himself running around trying to overwhelm the group. As long as you don't let that happen, you can kill him really quickly on the original story mode. However, if we move on to the Nightmare version of the operation, this boss fight is actually incredibly difficult. I myself have not managed to clear it after 30-40 attempts with various guilds. The concept is, when the DPS are doing their DPS check, the force spirits from the perimeter slowly close in and basically create a kill zone that no one can stand in. So the idea is the DPS need to all turn around and at the same time, in unison, knock back all the force spirits and then go back to DPSing in a very short time frame. Now, I've never done this. I've never found a DPS that can actually turn around, do the knockback, go back to DPSing. It is very difficult, and every time we've run it, there has been one or sometimes two DPS who just miss the knockback, and the group instantly wipes. And it happens at 50% health, this phase. So you've made a lot of progress already. For it to just wipe the group instantly is such a pain, and it's the reason it's numbered on this list.
Number 8.
Coming in at 8th today on our list is the very well-known boss from the Operation Dread Palace. It is the final boss, and that is the Dread Council. Now this boss is a hoot and a half, purely because it's incredibly complicated and a bit mental at times. So the idea is you have your tank, your DPS and healers all having to communicate like crazy. the mics will be in full boom half of the time, and there will be a lot of chaos going on. Your raid leader will be sitting there screaming his arse off, asking for cleanses. You'll have the DPS checking the health bar every 5 seconds, and of course you'll have your tanks crying because they can't successfully pull off the tank swap. That's an inside joke. But ultimately, this raid is incredibly difficult as it is. To finally conclude it with the Dread Council is just ridiculous. So if you've cleared Dread Palace on Nightmare, give yourself a pat on the back because it is the hardest content in the game.
Number 7.
Taking 7th place on our list today is one of my favourite characters of all time, and that is of course Revan. Revan is the final boss of the Temple of Sacrifice operation, and he is of course very well known in lore, so those of you who haven't heard of him obviously don't play Star Wars: The Old Republic nearly enough. Ultimately, Temple of Sacrifice on story mode is not a very difficult operation. The final boss, Revan himself, actually isn't that much more difficult. It requires perhaps a little bit more concentration from the DPS. If the DPS can successfully perform both the DPS checks, you have no trouble sort of doing this operation. However, on the hard mode, there is a minor cleanse which can sometimes catch you off guard from HK. There are a few AoEs that you have to watch out for, and the DPS check at the very end can be a bit of a struggle because everyone in the group takes progressive damage based on the DPS you do. So if the DPS don't do enough, the group wipes. So yes, if you're a DPS and you want an easy operation, I would not suggest starting with the Temple of Sacrifice. Now, the reason Revan is actually number 7 on our list today is because of a very funny element in the actual operation. Once you've done the first phase of Revan, there is actually a jumping puzzle to move on to the second phase. A lot of groups actually wipe because of the jumping puzzle rather than the actual mechanics of the boss. So yeah.
Number 6.
6th spot on our list today goes to the Underlurker boss from Temple of Sacrifice. The Underlurker, who will hereforth be referred to as the Undertaker, has a very interesting mechanic unlike most bosses in other operations. This move specifically is called Devastation, and it occurs at the very end of the Underlurker's rotation. The mechanic itself is actually an AoE, but unlike most AoEs, it's not harmful. The idea is the players have to come from all sides of the room to stand in their specific slot within the AoE. So there is a tank hook, a DPS hook, and a healer hook, and all parts of the classes have to stand in their specific sections. So if that makes sense, the idea is the players have to stand in that specific area for a limited amount of time to avoid a certain amount of damage. If the player fails to do so, they will instantly be killed. Now, the reason that this is number 6 on my list is because this is a very interesting mechanic, and I like how it actually analyzes player positioning. It is something that is crucial to all aspects of operations. Tanks, DPS, and healers all need to know how to do positioning, and the idea of encouraging better positioning in the form of an AoE, I think personally, is a really great idea. And finally, another mechanic that's actually based on positioning is a move called Collapse, where the boss every 9 seconds will summon a random AoE. This AoE will instantly kill any tank, DPS, healer standing within it. So of course, if you have someone in your guild or your group who's not very good at positioning, just give them a go at the Undertaker, and of course, they'll learn. They'll learn.
Number 5.
Coming in at the halfway point, number 5 is the Infernal One, also known as SOA. He is the final boss in Eternity Vault. SOA is actually taking the spotlight primarily because of his 3-stage encounter. Now, unlike most bosses, this boss actually has a parkour aspect, and an element that requires killing adds in the form of pillars that eventually progressively leads to the final boss fight itself. Now, the reason I like this boss so much, actually, in comparison to others, is because of the first stage of the boss fight, where the players have to jump down these sort of levels, these floors, and destroy these pillar adds on each floor. Now, at this point, there is a lot of strain on the healers because they have to AoE heal as much of the group as possible as they take full damage, and the reason I actually enjoy it so much is because it can get really manic on chat. The idea of someone screaming and blaming the healer because, you're not healing them enough when actually they jump down 2 floors instead of 1 and it's their fault. It's that sort of, banter, for lack of better words. It encourages a lot of arguments in the guild, but in a fun way, because you never know if it's the healers messing up or if it's the DPS/tanks jumping off a cliff. So, that's the reason it's number 5.
Number 4.
Taking the 4th spot on our list today is a boss you probably wouldn't expect, as it is part of the Eternity Vault operation as well, but it's not the final boss. In fact, it's the second final boss, called the Infernal Council. Now, this is a group of 16 bosses, all of which fight members of your ops group. So if you've got a group of 16, it's literally just 1v1 pairings, and you're almost fighting someone of equal ability. So it's a very difficult fight, and it puts everyone in the ops group under pressure, especially on Nightmare difficulty, which of course is no longer a thing. But back in the day, it was incredibly intense, and watching your fellow guildmates or your fellow friends trying to fight these bosses while you're trying to fight them as well is always so intense and so cool. And if just one person messes up, the entire group messes up, which is part of the reason it is definitely number 4 on my list.
Number 3.
Taking the bronze medal today is one of my favourite operation bosses of all time. This is by far my personal favourite, but ultimately a lot of people I don't think will agree. This is the boss Coratanni and Pearl from the Operation Ravengers. Now, the reason I'm so fixated on this boss, and the reason it was number 3 on my list today, is primarily because of the vast array of various different movesets that the boss offers to the operation. Now let me explain. By this I of course mean the boss uses so many different moves. You have AoEs being thrown off all the time. There's a dot called Corrosive Grenade that's always going off. Every 30 seconds the entire room lights on fire, and there's a button press required. And that's not even the half of it. Once you kill Coratanni and Pearl, another boss shows up called Rugar, and Rugar has a completely different moveset, but it's still part of the same boss fight. So if you mess up on Rugar, you have to go and fight Coratanni and Pearl again, which is crazy, but it's so much fun because it's an incredibly intense fight and you don't want anyone to mess up. But during Rugar's fight specifically, he has an entirely different moveset. One move, for example, called Death Mouse, which is basically an exploding suicidal droid that blows up and instantly kills someone in the group. He has a move called Hostage Situation, where he basically stuns someone, goes behind them, and tries to kill them, and the intention is the entire group has to just do tons of damage to him to get him off. He's got a 60-second cooldown, so that's happening all the time. There are various knockbacks, where the people get, your group gets thrown back, and it's just so intense. And you have to be so careful because it's so easy to die on Rugar, and you don't want to have to fight Coratanni and Pearl again as part of the same fight. And because of that, it's just so much going on. It definitely makes number 3 on this list.
Number 2.
Taking the spotlight as our runner-up today is one of my favourite of all-time operation bosses. I know all of these are, of course, my own top 10, so I'm going to love them all, but this one specifically is just so manic. It is the Cartel Warlords from Scum and Villainy. On Nightmare mode, this operation fight is crazy. They have so many different moves, and you have to have basically your tanks working 24/7 to keep aggro, and having to double check that the DPS aren't being overwhelmed by the amount of damage being dished out by these crazy bosses. I'm not really going to go into much detail with the mechanics because the way this boss fight actually works is depending on who you kill first and which group you kill first, you're going to get different adds and different movesets being used on you, so it would take a little while to explain. But ultimately, if I were to focus on one aspect specifically, for example Sunder, he spends half of his time chasing the tank round, and if the tank loses aggro for just a second, this is on story mode, it doesn't even have to be Nightmare, he's going to jump around and just one-shot the whole raid, and you're going to wipe there and then. It is so intense. If someone just slips up a little bit, the Cartel Warlords completely dominate you. So you have to really be on your toes with this fight. This is not your average everyday operation boss. The Cartel Warlords are incredibly intense, incredibly random, and I think that's why it has to make number 2 on this list. Not to mention the fact that if you mess up as a DPS and you over DPS a target, you're going to enrage the rest of the Cartel Warlords, and they're just going to wipe you. If you're a healer and you fail to miss a cleanse, or you fail to miss a heal, because there is an armor debuff that is thrown out every 5 seconds, and healers need to switch to make sure the tank is completely cleansed. If you miss a cleanse or you're late for a cleanse as a healer on Nightmare mode, your group's going to wipe. It is by far one of the most intense operation bosses I've ever fought, and I'd definitely give it second on this list.
Number 1.
Coming in at number 1, the gold medal, the winner of today's top 10 lists, my favourite operation boss of all time in Star Wars: The Old Republic is by far Master and Blaster. Now, the reason I like this boss so much is because you have the combination of Blaster and Master. Now, Blaster is basically this giant robot that does max damage to everyone in the area, tons of AoEs, tons of flaming burn damage, huge cannons, just this stereotypical massive mecha tank. Also, he's a redneck, and he's hilarious, and his commentary is just spot on, and I can't help but laugh. And the laughing itself actually distracts me sometimes, so that's why we wipe. And I think, you know what? There's no better way to die in an operation. And Blaster's not even the half of it. You have another droid that shows up called Master. He's a little astromech and reminds me of when R2-D2 has his little fits in the Clone Wars TV show. Furthermore, of course, you actually have a reference there. The Master and Blaster reference itself is actually a complete little nod to Mad Max, which is, of course, a movie that I'm sure all of you have seen. It's hilarious, and I definitely suggest going and checking that out. And that is why Master and Blaster are first on my list. So there we have it, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed another top 10. And of course, if you'd like to see them more, feel free to leave in the comment section down below your recommendations. And of course, if you get some time, hit that referral link because that really helps me. And I've got a plan for an RP series now that I'm starting to really develop that I think will be really funny, really cool, but I need the cartel coins to do it. So if you want to help out the channel, the referral is the best way. And of course, you can always hit that sub button if you'd like to see more weekly content. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye, guys.